All right, I was doing some research and I came across a very interesting document on the United Nations website. This is from the Population Division, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, United Nations Secretariat. The title is Replacement Migration. Is it a solution to declining and aging populations? From the 21st of March 2000, which is almost 24 years ago now. This document is in a bunch of different languages, and the total number of pages is 177. So obviously I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to get into some of the highlights here and just kind of see if what is being described in this document fits with what we're witnessing in the world all around us. First here is the executive summary. Replacement migration, is it a solution to declining and aging populations? The United Nations Population Division monitors fertility, mortality, and migration trends for all countries of the world as a basis for producing the official United Nations population estimates and projections. Among the demographic trends revealed by those figures, two are particularly salient: population decline and population aging. Focusing on these two striking and critical trends, the present study addresses the question of whether replacement migration is a solution to declining and aging populations. Replacement migration refers to the international migration that would be needed to offset declines in the size of population, the declines in the population of working age, as well as to offset the overall aging of a population. The study computes the size of replacement migration and investigates the possible effects of replacement migration on the population size and age structure for a range of countries that have in common a fertility pattern below replacement level. And the 8 countries that they examine are France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Korea, Russia, the UK, and the United States. The time period covered is roughly half a century, from 1995 to 2050. According to the United Nations population projections, Japan and virtually all the countries of Europe are expected to decrease in population size over the next 50 years. For example, the population of Italy, currently 57 million, is projected to decline to 41 million by 2050. The Russian Federation is expected to decrease from 147 million to 121 million between 2000 and 2050. Similarly, the population of Japan, currently 127 million, is projected to decline to 105 million by 2050. In addition to the decrease in population size, Japan and the countries of Europe are undergoing a relatively rapid aging process. In Japan, for example, over the next half century, the median age of the population is expected to increase by some 8 years, that is, from 41 to 49 years. And the proportion of the Japanese population 65 years or older is expected to increase from its current 17% to 32%. Similarly, in Italy, the median age and the population increases from 41 years to 53 years, and the proportion of the population 65 years or older goes from 18% to 35%. And then down here, they actually get into projections as far as the total and average annual numbers of migrants for the period 2000 to 2050 that would be needed in each particular scenario. For example, in one of the projections, the total number of migrants for the United States for the 50-year period is 38 million, and the average annual number is 760,000. And then they extrapolate that into what the actual population numbers would be and the impact that that would have on the working age population versus the retirement age population. Except for the United States, the numbers of migrants needed to maintain the size of the total population are considerably larger than those assumed in the medium variant of the United Nations projections. Major findings of this study include, during the first half of the 21st century, the populations of most developed countries are projected to become smaller and older as a result of below replacement fertility and increased longevity. In the absence of migration, the declines in population size will be even greater than those projected, and population aging will be more rapid. Although fertility may rebound in the coming decades, few believe that fertility in most developed countries will recover sufficiently to reach replacement level in the foreseeable future, thus making population decline inevitable in the absence of replacement migration. And this is the part where it gets really interesting, because we have to ask the question, well, why is fertility decreasing? Why have sperm counts in particular decreased so significantly over the past 50 years? Why are certain parts of the world population having less kids? Is the financial system contributing to this as well? Is it artificial in some ways, the pressure that's being put on people to not have children? And then are they offering a solution to that problem that seemingly won't be solvable? Meaning, hey, we have to do this replacement migration or else these countries won't survive. Noting that in the process, no matter what you say about it, it is obvious that replacement migration, taking people from other countries and different cultures and moving them into a foreign culture that is alien to them, will have a significant impact on what that culture ends up being if it's done in large enough numbers. You could really alter the demographics of a country through this process in permanent ways. And based on what the UN is saying here in this report, it's something that they have to do because of what is transpiring in the world. Well, we have to do this or else our population demographics in these certain countries will not sustain the system as it exists currently. And that is interesting too, because it implies that having smaller and older populations in certain Western nations is actually a bad thing. Now, I understand that there's a certain working age replacement level where you need to have a backbone in your economy of people that are a certain age. I mean, viewing the economy like a business in this context. Yes, you need a certain amount of people that are of working age in order for the thing to function. If a country's population got too old and there weren't enough working age individuals, it might have very negative effects in terms of the whole thing functioning correctly. But at the same time that they're telling us that, they're also telling us that we're moving into this brave new world of AI and automation and machine learning, which is going to significantly disrupt labor markets. And you have presidential candidates in the United States of America, for example, who are openly campaigning on this idea and promoting UBI, saying, look, what's coming is going to decimate the labor market in ways that people aren't appreciating. And we're going to have a whole bunch of people that are displaced from their jobs due to advances in all of these different AI fields, even though it's not technically artificial intelligence, it's more machine learning based on data, which is why data is the new gold. And every part of the internet wants your data because they need more and more of it to refine their machine learning algorithms. But anyways, in that context, life is going to get easier and easier for the people who are existing in this world 20, 30 years from now, where the overwhelming majority of physical labor will be done by machines, significantly reducing the amount of labor that you need. So this kind of flies in the face of that trend, this idea that you have to have this replacement migration for these countries to survive in the Western world. It's like, hold on a second. If the trend you are getting at is true, and we're going to need universal basic income programs for people because there won't be as many jobs, why do we need all of this replacement labor? Is there another reason that this is transpiring, in other words? I don't know. I'm just asking the question because when you go to reports on what is going to transpire in the labor markets, the projected statistics are quite staggering. top jobs lost to automation, up to 20 million manufacturing jobs could be lost to robots by 2030. 25% of jobs in the US are at risk of automation. 1.6 manufacturing jobs are lost for every new robot. Automation will create 133 million jobs by 2022. And this is what they say. Yes, it's going to displace a whole class of workers in a bunch of different industries, but it will also create new jobs. However, again, you have the same problem there where replacement migration is mostly working age men in their mid to late 20s. And that population group from another country isn't going to be able to get the education that you would need for these new high-tech automation, machine learning type of jobs. That's something that you would need to go to school for or be trained in some way for, and it would probably take a long time in a way that a non-native English speaker who's just learning a new country would not be able to become qualified for. And keep in mind that these are conservative estimates. We really don't know the true extent of what is coming if this technology alters the fabric of society in the way that some people claim that it could. Because these statistics are from a 2017 McKinsey report, and they could be seriously underestimating where we're headed. So back to this UN document. The projected population decline and population aging will have profound and far-reaching consequences, forcing governments to reassess many established economic, social, and political policies and programs, including those relating to international migration. For France, United Kingdom, the United States, and the European Union, the numbers of migrants needed to offset population decline are less than or comparable to recent past experience. While this is also the case for Germany and the Russian Federation, the migration flows in the 1990s were relatively large due to reunification and dissolution, respectively. For Italy, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and Europe, a level of immigration much higher than experience in the recent past would be needed to offset population decline. The numbers of migrants needed to offset declines in the working age population are significantly larger than those needed to offset total population decline. That's kind of what I was going into. Is that actually true? Now, in fairness to this document, it was written in the year 2000. You couldn't quite appreciate where we would be technologically speaking back in the year 2000. So viewing this as it is now, are they saying something that is actually true as it relates to the need to replace the working age population? Whether those larger numbers of migrants are within the realm of options open to governments depends to a great extent on the social, economic, and political circumstances of the particular country or region. If retirement ages remain essentially where they are today, increasing the size of the working age population through international migration in the short to medium term to reduce declines in the potential support ratio. And the support ratio is what they're referring to as the bare minimum working age population that you need to sustain the economic model. The levels of migration needed to offset population aging are extremely large and in all cases entail vastly more immigration than occurred in the past. Maintaining potential support ratios at current levels through replacement migration alone seems out of reach because of the extraordinarily large numbers of migrants that would be required. In most cases, the potential support ratios could be maintained at current levels by increasing the upper limit of the working age population to roughly 75 years. It's so interesting how all of these things are coming together all at the same time where, okay, we were going to say you could retire at 65, now we're going to have to make that 75 because there's just too many old people and we can't support all of your retirements. At the same time, we need to significantly alter the demographics of your country because bringing these migrants in is the only way for your country to survive, economically speaking. Otherwise, the whole thing will fall apart. And again, I don't know about that narrative. Does that track with where we're headed? It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. If we're going to have millions and millions of the people that already live in these countries displaced by technology, why do you need to bring in so many more working age migrants who will be competing for the same jobs? Some people would inevitably say that this is an economic thing where it's the same reason that illegal immigration is accepted in all of these countries, but especially America, because the large corporations don't have to pay a living wage to somebody who's just coming into the country, because what they're getting is so much better than where they came from as far as the purchasing power goes of their pay. So they will do jobs for less pay than someone who is native to that country would accept, because they're used to the standard of living and what it requires to exist there, and they know that the amount of work they have to put into that minimum wage job is not worth the pay, because you can't survive on it. And I mean, sure, that's going on. There are layers to this thing. I can't get into each and every layer and have this be a relatively short recording. But at the very least, I think we can see how there's some problems with this narrative being promoted in this document regarding the absolute need for replacement migration, considering what we know now about where the economy is headed and how it's going to look in the future. The new challenges being brought about by declining and aging populations will require objective, thorough, and comprehensive reassessments of many established economic, social, and political policies and programs. I mean, that's a pretty obvious statement, like, hey, you're going to have to seriously transform your society if you want this to happen. Ideologically speaking, you're going to really have to change people's attitudes, because it's a very controversial idea that's being promoted. Such reassessments will need to incorporate a long-term perspective. Critical issues to be addressed in those reassessments would include the appropriate ages for retirement, the levels, types, and nature of retirement and healthcare benefits for the elderly, the labor force participation, the assessed amounts of contributions from workers and employers to support retirement and healthcare benefits for the increasing elderly population, and policies and programs relating to international migration, in particular replacement migration, and the integration of large numbers of recent migrants and their descendants. And we can kind of see that taking place right now with the way that societies in the Western countries are being reformatted to accept this new reality that they are promoting to everyone. We can see that most obviously through programs like ESG and DEI, and just the general support that governments are giving migrants when they get here in a way that we've never seen it before, where they're being put up in hotels and given all kinds of resources right from the start when they get here. And then this is from the results section of the document that gets into fertility a little bit. And I just want to read this first paragraph. At the middle of the 20th century, the average fertility level stood at 2.6 children per woman in Europe and 2.4 children for the countries of the European Union. For the countries in this study, the range was from 2.2 children per woman in Germany and the UK to 2.7 children in France and in Japan. Fertility was markedly higher in the United States, 3.4 children, and even higher in the Republic of Korea, 5.4 children per woman. By 1965 to 1970, fertility had increased a little on average for the countries of the European Union to 2.5 children per woman, but had fallen below replacement level in the Russian Federation and in Japan at 2 children, and had also decreased in the United States to 2.5 children and more slowly in the Republic of Korea to 4.7 children. And think about what was going on in the 1960s in the United States of America in particular. It was a very chaotic decade that almost everyone thinks of as the hippie generation, the free love generation, which kind of began the breakdown of the nuclear family, right? And so what a coincidence that right into 1965 is when we start to see fertility rates decline in the United States of America. and all around the rest of the world, as we will see here. By 1995-2000, fertility was below replacement level in all countries and regions of the study, with a relatively wide range of levels, from a high of 2 children in the United States to 1.2 children in Italy. The average for Europe and for the European Union was 1.4 children per woman. That's a huge change when you look at what the numbers were before, in the 1950s and before. Again, we have to ask the question, is this a natural trend that just happened on its own, or was this coordinated to transpire so that it would lead into this quote-unquote need for replacement migration and the altering of traditional Western societies? It's a very interesting question. And then this is about the United States of America in particular, and I just wanted to read further about the fertility rate. The total fertility rate in the United States dropped from 3.45 births per woman in 1950 to 1955 to 2 in 1970 to 1975. Now, of course, that is what is referred to as the baby boom generation, which was all of these people that came back from World War II. And just in general, the country was very excited for that war to be over. And it was a very optimistic time where people were having a lot of babies. So part of the decline could be attributed to that, going from 3.5 births per woman to 2 in the 1970s. But at the same time, we're seeing this massive decline in fertility rates all across the world. So I don't think we can attribute it to just one generation of Americans that were referred to as baby boomers. Something is going on that's leading to people having less and less children. So that's really all I wanted to get into from this UN document. Now I want to go over to IOM, which is a UN migration program known as the International Organization for Migration, the principal UN agency working in the field of migration. The organization implements operational assistance programs for migrants, including internally displaced persons, refugees, and migrant workers. And then this is from the IOM website. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes that migration is a powerful driver of sustainable development for migrants and their communities. It brings significant benefits in the form of skills, strengthening the labor force, investment, and cultural diversity, and contributes to improving the lives of communities in their countries of origin through the transfer of skills and financial resources. The benefits of migration should not be seen only from the perspective of what migrants can bring to any given territory. The relationship between migration and development is much more complex. The political, social, and economic processes of potential destination countries will also determine how, where, and when migration occurs. If migration is poorly governed, it can also negatively impact on development. Migrants can be put at risk and communities can come under strain. As outlined in the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, migration is a multi-dimensional reality that cannot be addressed by one government policy sector alone. IOM therefore applies a whole of government and whole of society approach to migration governance, striving to ensure that migration and migrants' needs are considered across all policy areas, laws, and regulations, from health to education and from fiscal policies to trade. Very interesting, right? How this migration issue is giving a platform to legislate change through, right? You have this issue of migration in all of these countries that organizations like this come in and say, hey, we need to internationalize our approach to this migration thing. We need you to adopt these programs and have these things in place so that you can deal with this. And they're standardizing that across every country as a precursor to world government, right? This is one of the ways that you can have singular policies being employed all over the world simultaneously, because it's happening simultaneously in every country. And that is especially evident in the way that they are combining migration with sustainable development here. Sustainable development, of course, being a buzzword for climate change and all of those other policies that they are attempting to implement in a worldwide way. As it says here, the strategy represents IOM's direct contribution to the decade of action to fast-track progress for reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. The strategy brings greater coherence and development impact to IOM's activities and allows for a joined-up approach to the way the organization designs and delivers its operations, as called for in IOM's strategic vision. It supports IOM's active engagement in the UN development system and hinges on building stronger partnerships within the UN system and beyond. IOM supports governments in understanding how all of these governance areas are interrelated and are affected by migration, and to what extent other sectoral policies facilitate or impede migrants' ability to contribute to society. To achieve this, IOM supports governments with mainstreaming migration into local and national policy planning. This means amending or developing new national, regional, and local laws, policies, and plans that take into consideration these interlinkages and the needs of and challenges faced by migrants. We support our partners to integrate or mainstream migration to achieve policy coherence. This means that we ensure migrants and displaced people are considered in all policies, not just migration policies. And this means that we help coordinate horizontally across policy areas and vertically between different levels of governance to ensure all our work protects and empowers migrants to be agents of sustainable development. Empowers migrants to be agents of sustainable development. Very interesting. These concepts are enshrined in the Global Compact for Migration's whole of government and whole of society approaches. Oh, this is fascinating, right? We're starting to see a different angle to this replacement migration issue, how they're using it to take whole of government and whole of society approaches to legislate change into the destination countries. And the compact it referred to was the Global Compact for Migration. The Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration is an intergovernmentally negotiated agreement prepared under the auspices of the United Nations that describes itself as covering all dimensions of international migration in a holistic and comprehensive manner. And this was drafted in 2018 and later signed in December of 2018. The compact is a non-binding cooperative framework, meaning it has limited weight under international law. And then this is more on the whole of society approach. While policymaking on migration governance tends to take place at the national level, a national-only approach fails to consider that the development impact of migration is most profoundly felt at the local level. In order to be able to mainstream migration into community development plans for a more cohesive society, IOM supports the development of local migration profiles and community mapping exercises to facilitate this. So going back to the replacement migration document from the UN, it's obvious that this was something on the mind of policymakers who do this type of thing many decades ago. And I think we're seeing this actual strategy being implemented over the past decade especially, which seems to be increasing in scope as each year progresses. But at the same time, because this was written in the year 2000, I think we have to ask the question, is the economy heading in a direction where this is still necessary? Would it be so bad if Western countries had an older, less dense population than they had 75 years ago? Do we really need that many workers considering where we're going, to the point where we have to force migration against the will of the countries that they're going to quote unquote save them? Is that really what's going on? Again, I don't know. I'm just researching this like any other person would because it's all over the news. I don't have the answer to this question. I'm just speculating here. So hope you found that useful, but that's it. Later.